call the May 18, 2023 Board of Zoning Appeals and Planning Commission meeting to order. Staff, will you call the roll?
Schwartz.
Here.
Strand. Here. Schaefer. Here. Seltzer. Here. Macklin. Here. Martin.
Here.
And Gertson.
Here. Welcome to everyone. It's been, Mark and I were discussing, it's been some time since we've had a Board of Zoning Appeals case. The date on the minutes that hope you reviewed in your packet is correct. It is a March 17, 2022 case. That was the last time we had one. So if you've had a chance to review, Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from March 17, 2022 Board of Zoning Appeals, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved. To ensure the rights of all parties of interest and to provide an opportunity for each party to address the Board of Zoning Appeals, the BZA, in an orderly manner, the BZA will follow the fact-finding procedure which is outlined in the handout in each chair. Your attention to this procedure is appreciated. All decisions by the BZA are final. Decisions may be appealed to the district court within 30 days of the decision. If a decision is made tonight, that decision will be based upon the record of information presented to the BZA. I will now formally open for public hearing regarding case number 2023-01. A request by Benjamin Mosier for a special exception from the Reno County zoning regulations to construct a 40 by 50 residential accessory building and permit a total of 22,160 square feet of accessory buildings. The total square footage of all accessory buildings exceed the 2,000 maximum permitted on a parcel with 2.0 acres or less. The property is zoned R3, Single Family Residential District, and located at 5638 Johnson Drive. Have any of the BZA members had any outside contacts regarding this case?
No.
Do any BZA members have any conflict of interest in this case?
No.
Will the applicant please come to the podium? Please state your name and address for the record. You have 10 minutes to present your case. Additional time may be allotted to the applicant at the discretion of the chair. BZA members may request clarification at the end of your presentation.
Thank you. Am I allowed to pass out photos?
Sure.
Okay. Here's one packet, another. I didn't want everybody fiddling with different ones. Yes, they're all the same.
Are these the same?
They're all the same.
Oh, okay.
And
Have you got?
No, I don't have one yet.
Don't break down.
Two there, one there.
You'll need one more.
yeah, I'm sending.
Go ahead. We can share it if you want to.
Yeah, we could
I was
share.
gonna say we can
Okay,
share.
here's one more and one more.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
All right.
We need one more now.
Go ahead, I'll share with.
Okay, so,
It's all the same.
yeah, everybody's is the same. Did everyone read our letter? We have waited years to be able to build a shop on our property, and now we can. We did not know that we needed a special permit, and after speaking with Mark, thank you so much for teaching us everything and answering our 100 questions. We understand why, and we agree with it because we were wrong in some of the things that we had planned, but we still would like your approval in building our proposed garage. The first picture on the very front shows where we want it, and to the north is 59th, to the west is Johnson Drive. Everything on the south side of our property is, that's where we spend most of our time. That's why we want our shop on the north side. Second page, you can see our home from the from the west looking towards the east. This is our home. You can see kind of by where our camper is. That's where we spend a lot of our time. It's just a shaded area. We never, ever, ever, I probably go weeks, maybe a whole month without going to the north side of our property. Either my husband mows it, or if he doesn't mow it, I mow it, but we just never use it. And that's why we wanted to build our shop there. Third page, this is the road visibility. You can see towards 59th. Again, road visibility. Here is a photo of our home looking northeast from the west. You can barely see where our garage might be built. Looking north from the southwest corner. Labeled looking north from southwest corner. You cannot see at all where we're planning to build our garage. Flip again. This would be the first very, very, very green photo where you can see where our chicken coop is, our camper is stored over there, our little shed. To the left is our little sheep and goat pen. This is where we spend a lot of our time. We do not want to build here just because this is home. This is where home is. We never use the north side of our home, and that's where we would wish to build. If you flip again, I labeled this. You can see Miss Nora's yard from our home. This area is used a lot. Gardening, kids, cookouts. It's right outside of our kitchen. So we do not wish to build here at all. Right where the dumpster is, still on that's where our septic tank is. Right where that bald patch is, nothing grows over it because it's just concrete and moisture doesn't hold very well. Flip again, this is where you see our sheep and our little goat. View to the northwest from the southeast. This I thought was important because it shows you that although it looks like a lot of area, it really isn't. Our pool is probably 20 or 30 feet away from our goat pen, and if we can't build on the north side of our land, we're just not gonna move forward, and we're probably gonna sell our home. This isn't anything we would like to fill up with a shop. The north side is the only place that we think that we could build. If you flip one more, this is a view from Miss Nora's house looking towards our home. View from the southeast to the northwest. You can see that she would be able to see our garage. She can see, when we're out there barbecuing. That's our land right there that we use the most. If you flip again, view to the west from the east. This is where you start to see where we never use I labeled it zero use area. We started construction. We stopped as soon as we found out that we were doing something we were not supposed to. You can see our home, and that door that you see goes into our garage. We don't use that unless we're feeding the dogs or mowing their area, but we are rarely over here. We're rarely on the north side of our property. If you flip again, this was important because of the road visibility coming from 59th towards Johnson Drive. We didn't think that it was a danger or anything. Here is where we were thankful that we were notified. You can see I labeled it distribution box septic. That is where our distribution box is, coming from the septic system. Laterals go 80 feet towards the north, which we laid out a strip all the way to the north, 80 feet. If you flip again, this is where our old driveway would have drove over those. And we're thankful that we're not gonna be doing that. It would have been very expensive to repair if anything was to happen. If you flip one more time, here is what we are thinking, well, what we're going to do if you allow us. Old driveway would be moved a little bit towards the west. I've labeled the west laterals, east laterals, and in the next few pictures, I'll show you where my husband's work truck, it's a 2500, huge Ford toolbox on the back. It fits perfectly, so we didn't have to lose our driveway there. And I even have a video if you would like to see it. If you flip again, you can see that there's 10 feet between the laterals. I was thinking we need to mark it somehow. Maybe like some flowers or something, just so we know for future. New driveway is labeled on the following two pictures. The west laterals are labeled. They go all the way to that blue flag. And then here is, I took a screen grab of a video. It's the picture with the two black sides. The new driveway that we are proposing is marked in purple. Laterals are safe. The white tape, you can see where the laterals are. We will not be going anywhere near those with vehicles. You can see the west laterals and the east laterals, 10 feet between the laterals. We would never drive over those. Another picture where we show our driveway. And pictures are deceiving because it looks like it wouldn't fit. I never thought that this truck would fit there. But the very last photo, you can see that there's about 4 feet to the east and about 10 or 15 feet to the west of the truck. Plenty of space to do our driveway there. That was the only thing I felt that I needed to clarify. I also wanted to say, is there a timer?
You're fine.
Okay.
Usually 10 minutes, but you're fine.
Okay, I also wanted to say that the 5 things that needed to be met,
Well, if you want, the 5 factors is for the variance, so we're just here.
just for the.
We're just discussing the size of the shop building right now.
Okay, so-
You'll have an opportunity to discuss.
Okay, thank you.
variance next, yes, so just, sorry for
So
interrupting.
this one, no, you're fine. So, 40 by 50 building, we just said, we just wanted to go big. We are willing to go 50 by 30 if we need to bring it in from the road 10 more feet. We just really want somewhere where we can store our vehicles, and this is something that we can finally afford after such a long time. We're willing to kind of take your advice on the square footage, but we would really like a big shop on our property.
You did indicate that you might be willing to consider going a little smaller if necessary to get a little more setback from 95th Street. Because, I mean, right now, I think you're 160 feet over the limit, which is why you're here. So if you did reduce the size by 5 or 6 feet, you know, on the 30-foot side, you don't even need to be here. You know, the only issue you would have would be, you know, which I think the health department pointed out, was the location of the driveway and the laterals and whatnot, and that's, you know, you definitely don't want to screw up your laterals.
No.
Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you. We'll now hear the staff report.
Mark Bonacci, County Planner. On the screen is a picture of the zoning map. The property is zoned R3, which is our single-family residential zoning district. On the south side of the page is 56th Avenue, and to help orient you, you're a little ways west of Hendricks. So you're up in the northwest part of the county. You can see the subdivision is all zoned R3. There's some surrounding properties kind of within that subdivision area, but they're zoned R1, and the rest of the ground is zoned agricultural. This is a request to construct the 40 by 50 building as per the application. Currently, as you know, the property, as you saw from her photos, is under construction without a zoning permit, so it's currently in violation of the zoning regulations. There's also a small 160 square foot shed that's on the property, so that's essentially why we are here tonight to discuss this, is because the 40 by 50 coupled with the other small building puts them over the 2,000 square foot maximum that they're allowed. You recall that we switched the regulations here a couple of years ago on special exceptions. This board decided to leave alone the 2,000 square foot maximum for parcels that are 2 acres or less, and you guys actually changed everything that's greater than 2 acres to allow 5,000 square feet. So it was discussed with the applicant about possibly reducing the size of the building, thus avoiding the special exception. But as I pointed out to them, as they pointed out to me as well, there are other large buildings in that subdivision. And so I said, if you really desire to have a 40 by 50, then you should just go ahead and make that application and see what the Board of Zoning Appeals would say about something like that. And so that's why we're here today. This hearing is only about the size of the building. You're not discussing the location or anything else, the setbacks that would come at the next hearing that we will have. You're only looking at the size. Should this applicant be allowed to exceed the 2,000 square foot maximum only? Okay. Most of the lots out there in that subdivision are between a half acre and an acre in size. Some people will own 2 or more lots, and so they may have an acre to an acre and a half, but for the most part, each lot is between a half to an acre in size. Setbacks for corner lots, you're looking at 30 feet from the road right-of-way. You're looking at 8 feet from a side property line, and there is actually no rear yard setback because a corner lot does have 2 street yard setbacks here. There is a provision in our regulations that will allow a reduction in one of those street yards should it become necessary to say comply with setback requirements. Unfortunately, the way this lot is laid out, that break would happen on Johnson Drive instead of 59th Avenue. The next section in my report kind of really lays out the applicable regulations that deal with special exceptions. I won't go over those, but they were provided for you in my report. And looking at that area, you can see that there's no house that's directly to the west of their property. A lot of the other houses are surrounded by trees, and so you're looking at a fairly large building that they are proposing. However, there is some shelter as far as trees go, and you have the issue of no house directly to the west that could possibly be impacted visually by a large building. There are other comparable sized buildings in that subdivision. If you take a drove through that area, you'll see similar sized buildings. Though either probably constructed without a permit, we hope not, they could be. They could have been more likely constructed at a time when we did not have a shed size limitation, which would have been prior to 2016, or they could have been constructed prior to having zoning implemented in this area of the county. So just wanted to kind of point out that there are other similar sized sheds in that area out there. Based off of all that reasoning, then staff is recommending approval for them to be able to construct a 40 by 50 shed on the property. I did attach 3 conditions of approval. The first one would be that approval is not exceed a 40 by 50 or 2,000 square foot shed. You will note in this case that I did remove part of that standard conditional approval I have. I usually will have it under approved as per plan submitted. In this particular case, we can't approve it per the plan that is submitted, but for the fact that it does not meet the current setback requirement on 59th Avenue. So what you would do if you choose to approve this is you would be approving them to place a 40 by 50 shed pretty much anywhere on the property that they so choose, so long as it is in compliance with the zoning regulations setbacks. Second one is that the accessory building shall only be used for non-commercial or non-industrial purposes. And then the third one is the accessory building should not be used as a single-family dwelling except in compliance with our regulations. The health department submitted comments regarding this case. I would note that the health department is not really concerned about the size of the shop. They don't care if it's a 10 by 12 shed. They don't care if it's a 100 by 200 shed. All they're focusing on is the fact that does that shed and that shed location interfere with the lateral system, the septic tank, and or the well. So really their comments regarding the size of the shed are really none. They're really immaterial. They looked at the size of the shed. They don't have an issue as long as that shed size does not interfere with the laterals, and they said that it doesn't. And like I said before, the approval would grant the owner the permission to construct the building anywhere on their property so long as it is in compliance with the regulations. I would mention that one person did respond against the proposal. If you read the comments, the person talks about the special exception, but I want to point out, just make sure that we have on record, that talking about loud parties and going into the night, other loud music going on in the building, that is not really something that you should be considering. That is not a land use thing. That is not something to take into consideration when making a recommendation on that. I really felt this comment probably should have been placed under the variance, but the person did talk about the special exception, and so that's why it's under there. But really, the comments that were presented are immaterial to your decision here tonight. So if you have further questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. I do have some slides I can go through. You do have several pictures, and those pictures are probably better than what I'm going to show you here tonight. But first, is there any questions before I maybe run through my slides real quick? These are all in your packet, by the way, but this is the applicant's site plan showing the location of the shed on the north side of the property. And again, you're not approving the location tonight, you're just approving or denying the fact that can they build a 30 by 50 shed. This is kind of an overview of the area taken from Google Earth from 2019. You see their house in the southeast corner. 59th Avenue goes east to west, and then Johnson Drive would be the second road that you see starting from the right and going to the left. And so their house is right there. You can see the pool. Kind of gives you an overview. You can see that there's no house directly to the west. The house to the north is buried in some trees right there, so they would probably have minimal visual impact, from a large shed being placed somewhere on the property. The other house is to the east, and again, you see a fairly substantial tree row that's right there. A little closer view of the property. That's all I had really for the special exception portion of this. So.
Questions? Any questions for staff? Thank you. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this case, you may have 5 minutes to comment. Please come forward to the podium, one at a time, and state your name and address for the record before commenting. Audience members are only permitted to address the BZA from the podium. Audience members are permitted only one time at the podium. In the interest of time, if you agree with the comments previously made by audience members, please don't repeat the comments. Simply state you agree with the previous comments and then present the new information to the BZA. Statements and questions should only be directed to the BZA, not the applicant or staff. The BZA may choose not to answer questions or engage with the public. Questions regarding the application can be asked to the BZA and answered by the applicant or staff during rebuttal phase of the hearing. Don't believe we have anybody here. Is there any additional statements the applicant would like to make?
I would also like to say that the property west of us, there's a pipeline that goes through there, so there will never be a home built there, and it goes down into the property south of us, so there will never be a home built there either. And I think that helps us because I understand why the rules are there to kind of, the R3 is a type of property. They don't want that much square footage being taken up by buildings and accessory buildings and sheds. And so I understand, and I think that, I don't know if that would probably help with the square footage being what we wish it to be.
Thank you. Staff, do you have any additional comments?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Does the BZA have any other questions or comments?
Yeah, the only question I have, you're on city water out there, or do you have your own well? I didn't see in any of the drawings where that's located.
It was in the basement, wasn't it?
Oh, it's in the basement?
Health department.
Okay, that's right, I remember reading that.
There is a map that will show where our well is, just in reference to our septic tank, but
Yeah, I'm not concerned about it, I forgot, I remember reading that you said that was in the basement.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the public hearing is now closed. Acceptance or denial of a special exception must be based on the public hearing record of information and its opinion. As a matter of fact, such special exception will not adversely affect the uses of adjacent neighbors and neighboring properties. This is a time for the BZA to discuss the case, and we can ask procedural questions of staff only. Is there any other questions or discussion about this case?
I did drive around the neighborhood or the area, and I would agree with Mark's comments. There's a number of sizes of buildings and locations, and this would not seem to be out of place as far as how the land is used in that area, even though it's 160 feet over our requirement.
I did the same, noticed the same as your comments.
There were a couple of very large buildings, but I don't know whose property they were on or how big the property was, but.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, staff call the roll, please. Whoop.
First, we probably.
Well, we gotta have a motion, shouldn't we? I was ready. Chair will entertain a motion.
I would make a motion. I move that case number 2023-01, the request by Benjamin Mosier requesting a special exception from the Reno County zoning regulations to permit the total square footage of all accessory buildings on the parcel to exceed the 2,000 square foot limit in the R3 single-family residential district at 5638 Johnson Drive be approved, allowing a 40 by 50 or 2,000 square foot in size as requested in the application, and subject to the conditions listed above based upon the reasons stated in the staff report and as heard at this public hearing.
I second the motion.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Now I'm ready, staff. Please call the roll.
With pleasure. Schwartfeger.
yes.
Strand.
Yes.
Schaefer.
Yes.
Seltzer.
Yes.
Macklin.
Yes,
Martin.
Yes.
And Gertson.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, next item of business for the BZA. The requirements outlined in the first reading before we open the previous case still stand. I'll formally opening the public hearing regarding case number 2023-02, the request by Benjamin Mosier for a variance from Article 13, District Height, Area, and Bulk Regulations in the Reno County Zoning Regulations. Article 13 requires a property zoned R3 to maintain a minimum 30-foot front yard setback for all buildings. The applicant requests to construct a building 10 feet from the front yard setback. The property is located at 5638 Johnson Road. I'll ask again, has any BZA members had any outside contacts regarding this?
No.
No.
Do you have any conflict of interest in this case?
No.
Okay. All right. If you'll please come to the podium and state, now, we've approved the building, now we got to decide where it's going to be. So,
Okay, so I get very confused about both of the variance and the other thing, so. We do not think that our proposal is contrary to the public health, safety, interests, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, or general welfare. A lot of our neighbors have expressed that they support us. Even the people that sent in a complaint were supporting us. We were super shocked to hear that they were the ones to send that in. The literal enforcement of the zoning regulations will result in hardship for our family because to us, hardship is hardship, and it's not, we don't think that we are allowed to tell someone else what their hardship is. So for us, we are gonna have to move. Just because we are growing, I'm expecting in November, I have said the words, I want to die in my home because I love it so much. I love where it is. I love Hutch. But we're growing, and I think that our private garage would be perfect to just have for storage. And for us, a hardship would be to have to move because we just don't fit anymore. Also, we don't use the north side of our lot. We never go over there. Let's see. I think there exists some condition which is unique to the parcel and is not commonly found on other parcels and was not created by the actions of the owner or agent. I had expressed several reasons to us, but I guess trees and soil and where we spend our time wasn't good enough reasons. We just think a valid land use reason is the north side of the lot is not being used at all. We are a corner lot. You can see the pictures. We're just never gonna build. Even if we built on our southeast corner, the shop that we really wanted, we would still never use the north side of our land. So that's how we're coming up with the choice to put it on the north side so that we can use our entire property. We don't think that the proposed development will adversely affect the rights of adjacent owners. We have homes to the north of us and to the east of us, not to the west or the south. There's a pipeline that goes through there I mentioned earlier. So Miss Nora has expressed, she doesn't have a problem with it. She lives east of us. Crystal and Craig have told us, how they did it when they built their shop, and they've given us tips and tricks and pointers, so it was really shocking to hear that they had sent in a request to deny our special request. We recognize that the ordinances in place are intended to serve the purposes outlined in the Reno County zoning regulations. According to these regulations, the regulations are intended to serve the following purposes. This was in my letter, and we agree with all of these. We agree to promote the health, safety, comfort of the citizens, to create a variety of zoning districts. I understand our district now, to conserve good agricultural land and protect it from the intrusion of incompatible uses. This was a learning experience for me because of all of these reasons. We have prayed for this, and we hope that you will grant a variance in our favor. There were, according to the paperwork that we got, there were 3 factors that were in our favor, and the only ones that were not in our favor was the variance requested arises from such condition which is unique to the property, the strict application of the provisions will constitute unnecessary hardship, and again, like I said, hardship is, to us, is different. What kind of hardship would give us a yes? I mean, we're safe, we're healthy, we're not fighting with our neighbors, we're not, nothing's gonna fall on us from the sky, we don't live, next to a mountain with rocks. I didn't understand what answer I needed to give to get a yes on that. And all that comes to mind is the hardship of just our family growing. That's a hardship for us. We're just real people, and we need more space, and we finally have the money. Our kids are growing up. My 10-year-old is gonna drive in 4 or 5 years. We just really think that we would like to stay in our home, even though our family is growing. Let's see, number 3. The other one, we just want to use the north side of our lot. Economics was not to be taken into consideration. Needing more space to store personal items was not to be taken into consideration. There is a gas line south of us. Can't really build to I think the only hardship is the ones that we're not allowed to use. But the other 3, we did meet according to Mr. Mark. I don't know, I would answer questions if you have any. The east and the south, having so much space there, I think it would be okay for our setback to be smaller. We are a corner lot. About 1/3 of our property we can't use due to setbacks and our septic tank and our laterals. Maybe not 1/3, maybe 1/4. And we're just not willing to build on the area that we can build on. And we're asking for the variance to be granted in our favor.
Any questions for that?
The age of the laterals, when were they originally installed?
I can tell you the specific day because, 92, when I was born.
Oh,
And we haven't driven over them, the long way. We've only driven into our previous proposed, driveway. So we're thankful that we found that out.
Any other questions for applicant?
Do you have any backup plan if those laterals fail?
I have a digger.
Would you have space on the property?
I was thinking that we would move them to the south. So, if they failed and we needed to redo them, we would probably move them to the south.
and is the slope of the ground appropriate to allow the laterals to go the other direction?
I'm not sure. I don't know what the regulation would be for that. I don't know if slope has something to do with where the laterals can and can't be.
Well, yeah, I mean, you also have, soil type and whatnot, I believe, and if you went 80 feet in the other direction, you're getting into that area you have noted is that floods during heavy rainfall, which is probably not where you want your laterals,
Oh, you're right.
you know.
I
So as a
mean,
consideration, I mean, you need to deal
Correct.
with, irregardless of what we do
yeah, I
here.
agree. I think they would just
Yeah.
stay where they are.
Hope he's can dig ditches real fast.
And maybe I wasn't paying real close attention, but the drawing I have here shows you driving across the laterals, but you talked, when we were talking about the size of the building, some changes have been made there.
Correct. So in the pictures that
I understand those changes.
In the pictures that I gave you, let's go to the last photo. The very last photo shows old driveway, new driveway. You can see the white line, which that's a tape measure that we laid out 80 feet from our distribution box. And you can see I labeled plenty of space between the truck and the white tape. Laterals are safe. The two circles in purple, that's where they end. And it's approximate, I think it was 8 or 10 feet between those two, the west and the east 80-foot laterals.
And how far is it from the edge of the new driveway to that one lateral, closest lateral?
Oh, that tire looks like it's 4 feet.
The tire isn't at the end of the driveway though, or the end of the new driveway though. It appears to be kind of in the center in the drawing.
So 2 feet? But, I think we could take a recommendation, how close we could be, how close we can't be.
Is there enough room to turn around? Is the expectation that all the traffic in and out of the shed will be driven forward and then backed out at an angle onto the road?
What do you mean? So when he pulls in,
When you pull into the shed, so how are you gonna turn around to get back out of the shed?
reverse.
Okay, so you're
Back
gonna
up.
back out.
So you're gonna back out?
Yeah, I
and around
have the
corner.
video where his truck there's just so much room, which with that picture this picture, I did not think that truck would fit in between the laterals and where our door was, but that's the space, and you can see that.
I see it driving forward. Was it driving in reverse?
Yeah, let me look at yeah, that's the best picture that I have. The last, second to last, third to last photos show it better. Oh, here's a better picture, the fourth to last photo. we have a blue flag there. And it shows, it's a lot of space. And, I mean, right there, I was like, there's no way we're gonna have to change our door. But I asked my husband, I said, I wanna take a video, back up the truck, put it back in, and
Is there much traffic on 59th Street?
no. There's more
Because you're gonna be
traffic.
backing out onto it,
Yeah, there's a dead
out of the driveway.
It's a
all
dead
the time.
end. It goes into Kennedy and then it goes south towards 56th. So people don't really go that way unless it's our neighbor that lives on Kennedy and 59th. Sometimes people take that way only, just to avoid kids, because there's way more kids now than there was 10 years ago. So they go that way to avoid.
Concerned about safety issues, you always having to back out onto 59th Street out of the garage that way.
For sure.
Especially if there's not much visible,
Yeah.
because there isn't a lot of space between when you can see past the proposed building to when part of your vehicle is already out in the road, so if somebody's passing by.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Yeah, I do. Am I correct in assuming the reason you didn't want to move this new building towards the other street,
Johnson Drive.
Johnson Drive, is because of that oak tree there?
Yes.
And I look at this picture of this oak tree, and this picture, it looks to me like it's half dead.
Yeah, we have been struggling. We actually lost 2 trees this year and last year because of the drought. And we are struggling with just the drought and the iron. You can see the oak trees in our front yard. There's a lot of dead branches that we need to take care of. The tree in the backyard where the dogs are, that just happened last year to this year. So I don't want to cut any trees down.
And I realize that the vertical structures there are already there for the garage. Are they set in concrete?
The posts are.
And the reason I ask that question is all this dialogue we've had about backing in and driving in and backing out onto 59th Street and the safety factors there, that some of that would go away if the garage was a little bit further that way. But I also understand that you've got some investment in those posts too. But if you were going to consider making this building smaller, instead of 40 by 50, to get the right setbacks, you're going to have to move some of them posts anyway.
I'd like to ask a question. I think I can. You said that you're backing out on the drive. I don't understand why you don't back out between your lateral line and that pole there and drive out. You have plenty of room. Why do you say you have to back out the drive? When you can back out and drive out. Back out between the pole and your lateral and drive out.
We could. We've
Yes,
never
sir.
thought of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do what now, Don? Back
All they can
across
do
the
is
lateral?
back out and
Into
drive
the
out.
garden area.
Between the pole and the
drive out.
lateral, there's all.
No.
Oh, is there enough space there?
It's the same space, same width as the driveway.
So you don't need to back out.
Thank you.
And shouldn't back out.
Yeah. Larger driveway.
More gravel.
That solves some concerns.
Am I correct in assuming then the driveways you're talking about are all going to be gravel driveways? And the floor in this new building is all going to be gravel?
Concrete.
Gravel for a few years.
Yeah.
Concrete when we can afford it.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thanks. And now hear from staff.
Kind of switch my presentation a little bit. I want to talk about the discussion a little bit with the laterals. It's good that you're looking at that, and I think it's fair to discuss that, but you have to realize we're looking at the land use and the specific request of a 10-foot setback. Even if the applicant would say propose to put the building on top of the laterals, not a good idea, but you're still looking at a 10-foot setback requirement. You have to remember that there's a whole nother component to all of this. If you would approve the request for the variance, then they're going to apply for a zoning permit for the building. At that point in time, myself and the health department are going to review that, and if they see a concern with that, they're not going to approve the permit if they're too close to their lateral field. So the discussion on, I'm going to have 4 feet or 8 feet between my lateral field and the driveway, that may not be enough. That may not be enough. The health department may not approve of that. I can almost be assured that KDG is probably going to review that as well. And so, you know, you're concerned about how close you are and stuff. That's all going to be after you make your decision if you decide to approve of this, okay? You got to remember, because you're looking at a 10-foot setback. Okay, you can do it, because the last case you just approved them to put the building anywhere on the property right now. Okay, now they want to put it 10 feet from the property line. Well, they still have to go through the zoning permit process with me and the health department to get that approval to put it in the location that they want. And so I can tell you that, you know, in their write-up and then in conversations I had with Darcy and stuff, you know, they're going to want some kind of proof, and we're going to want some kind of proof that they aren't driving over their laterals or that they know exactly where their laterals are. You know, you heard testimony here, they didn't realize that they were right there and they couldn't do all that. And so there's still going to be that concern on our end, you know, I think if we get to the zoning permit process on that. So I just kind of wanted to, you know, put that out there first before I forget and before we kind of leave that discussion, you know, a little bit, okay? Now, so this is a request for a variance, as we've all aware. This is going to be probably the first variance we've done in I would say over 8 years. And so I think that says something a little bit about our regulations, that our regulations seem to be pretty reasonable in the sense that if they weren't reasonable, then we'd be probably doing a lot more variances for various things within our regulations. You heard the request is to have a 10-foot setback along 59th Avenue. As we discussed with the special exception a little bit, we don't differentiate between where your front door of your house is versus your side door or the side of the house. It's a 30-foot setback from a road right-of-way. If it becomes an issue, we have a provision in Article 14 that allows a person to go down to 15 feet on one of the other streets or so. It just so happens in this particular case, the 15 feet would apply to Johnson and not 59th Avenue, thus needing the request for the variance. You should only be focusing on that. Like I said, you've already approved them to go up to a 40 by 50 building. If they want to go less, they can certainly do that. The special exception is still good, it's still valid. If they want to do that and they can make it fit, or if they want to go somewhere else on the property, they're still allowed to go by 40 by 50. If they would have chosen 30 by 50, then they would not be having the special exception hearing that we just had. So with variances, like I say, we haven't done one in 8 years. I don't believe anybody on the board, except for maybe Jack, you know, when he was with the city, has gone through a variance process here. 5 factors have to be reviewed by the Board of Zoning Appeals. 5 factors have to be found to be in favor of the applicant in order for you to grant a variance for their request. Can't be 4, can't be 3, it has to be all 5, okay? So when you review a case, you have to look at what the question is and determine, does the applicant meet that requirement for that factor? If all 5 are in favor of the applicant, then you, as a board, can grant a variance for that. The first one is the variance arises from such a condition which is unique to the property in question and not ordinarily found. You gotta remember, you're looking at land use, you're not looking at personal wants or needs or anything like that. You're looking at land use, physical characteristics of a property. I mean, variances are pretty harsh. I think we all have sympathy to everybody's needs and wants, but variances are about land use and they're about what are the physical restrictions of a property. Is there something that is unique on that property that is preventing them from doing something that they want to do versus other properties or other parcels out in the county, anywhere? Do they have something that is extraordinarily unique? It could be, a large pond, a deep ravine, something physical that says, no, because of that deep ravine or that pond, I can't meet the setback requirements. So that's something that you can look at. All the lots in this subdivision are relatively the same size. All of them have utility easements in them. There are even other parcels that have this 100-foot gas line easement that are on them. And actually, the parcel that is to the west of them has a lot worse. And I will get to that picture here, because if you look at the one drawing that I have here, if you pull that out, you can see that gas line easement is kind of faded on that screen. But if you look, the majority of that parcel on the north side is subject to that gas line easement where nothing can go on there. Their house, that's why their house is so much further to the south. If you look at the dotted line that is on your subdivision plat, you'll see that that's the 100-foot gas line easement where no structures can go in there. And so there are other parcels within that subdivision, and as that gas line continues on, there's going to be other restrictions for other people out there. We have other subdivisions. You may know the one I can think of off the top is Brigadier Estate. Brigadier Estate's up by 43rd and Old 61. It's got a 100-foot power line easement that runs through a lot of those lots out there. So there are other houses and there are other properties that are having to deal with that type of situation. And so for those reasons, staff concluded that the utility easement, the corner lot situation, the 100-foot gas line easement, does not constitute a condition which is unique to the property in question and which is not ordinarily found in the same zone or district. The second one is the granting of the variance will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. In reviewing that, we looked at who could possibly be affected by them putting the building right there. You've heard discussion about being pretty close to the road. You've seen some fairly good and accurate pictures. I think it could be considered a little bit of a concern, having a large building out there, but, in looking at that, it's probably not going to be affecting the visual from people traveling on that road and that intersection. If you look at the other lots that are out there, they're in trees, so there's probably not going to be that much of a visual effect on such a building being placed, right there from the people that are surrounding in that area. So I concluded that the building location does not appear to adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners. The third one is the strict application of the provisions of the regulations of which the variances requested will constitute an unnecessary hardship. This is where you're looking for things that are possibly physically wrong with the property. Is it floodplain? Is it steep slopes? Are there ponds, other water features, wetlands on there? Is there something else on the property that could possibly hinder them from complying with our setback requirements? Although I can sympathize with her reason, unfortunately with variances, like I say, they're really strict. Economics or needing additional space, having to move a pool or a animal pen, those things unfortunately are not, in my opinion, something that you can consider when you're saying that, that there is something that is unique about that property. So with that, I say that, you can't do that on that kind of property, and so therefore, that would be a denial on my end here. You can look at the gas line easement as a possible hindrance out there. I mean, that is something that's not found necessarily on every single property, but in my opinion, when I looked at that and traced out that picture of that gas line easement out there, to me, it wasn't enough to say that the whole section of that property is being taken up. The setback along that property line right there will vary based off of where that is, but you can't put anything in the 30-foot right-of-way. And so that takes out that area automatically, and as you go back, that setback from that gas line easement will shrink it, and you could actually probably put a building in that area in compliance with the zoning regulations. And so, any questions at this point?
Mark, where does the 30-foot easement come from? Is that the developer did that back when this addition was platted?
Actually, no, the 30-foot setback comes from the zoning regulations. If you look at the subdivision plat, it's actually a 40-foot platted setback.
Okay.
So our regulations are actually less. We've been told by county councilor that you do not enforce things like that on a subdivision plat, but for the fact that over time, those can and do change. I believe the city of Hutchinson will enforce that on a plat. Our county councilor has taken a different approach and said that that's more like a covenant, and so you're not to enforce that, you're supposed to enforce the zoning regulations. Zoning regulations say 30 feet from the road right of way.
So the developer actually had a more strict,
The developer had something more
their
strict.
developer intent
Yep.
was more.
Think of it more as
strict.
like a covenant. So if the developer was still around, if there was like a homeowner association, then at that point, they would be the ones that would have to enforce that 40-foot setback requirement.
I have a related question to that. On our regulation about a corner lot and the 30 feet and the 15 feet applying to the shorter and the longer sides, what was the logic, if you remember, about the difference in setbacks versus the length?
Honestly, Mr. Tran, I don't believe that there was any discussion on that specific regulation as to why we chose the shorter versus the longer. I think the intent of the regulations was to give corner lots some type of break if needed. We always prefer that an applicant meets all of the standard setback requirements, but I think the regulations recognize that corner lots sometimes have an issue, especially in this case when you're dealing with lots that are, say, an acre and a half or less in size. If you got a 3-acre lot or a 5-acre lot or even greater, usually you can probably meet a 30-foot setback off both roads. That's usually not a big deal. I think the regulations recognize that we had a lot of smaller lots, that were platted way back before we even had zoning regulations, per se. And so they recognize that it could be an issue for forcing homeowners to meet two 30-foot or, say, 40-foot setbacks in this time when, as all the interior lots just have to meet the one 40-foot setback. So as far as the shorter or longer goes, I don't recall any discussion on that.
Thank you.
Moving on to the fourth one then, the variance desired will not adversely affect the public health, safety, order, or convenience, or general welfare. I found that there should be no impacts on that. I did note a little bit that there could be a little bit of an issue with public safety, given the fact that you're going to put a building possibly 10 feet from the road right away. However, in conversations and in emails as well, I asked Mr. Mosier, how far he was going to be from that intersection, and I believe it said 61 feet from there. So, if people are traveling the normal, what we call the normal quote-unquote subdivision speeds, then that really probably should not be much of an issue or anything like that. And so after all that, then, I said that the proposed location of the shed concluded that the proposal would not be contrary to the public health or safety in that sense. That's usually one that's not too much of a big deal, to meet for the applicant. It's usually the hardship not created by the applicant and the uniqueness of the property. The fifth one, the granting of the variance desired will not be opposed to the general spirit and intent of these regulations. Like I say, in our zoning regulations, we have 11 purposes. I've listed some of those in there. We've discussed the driveway concern with the health department and KDHE, but that's mainly going to be something that's going to be addressed at the zoning permit level if this is approved. But it's something that the owner and myself and the health department will work through on that if you decide to grant that variance. I had a pretty long write-up in here talking about the history. We had talked about it at the special exception about why we changed the special exception regulations, and at that time, there was a big discussion on setback requirements, and this board chose at that time not to change any kind of setback requirements, and so that's kind of the deciding factor, if you will, why I concluded that the accessory building location does appear to be contrary to the general spirit and intent. This board in 2021 really looked at the special exception regulations. Your main focus was on the size of the sheds, but also we were looking at setbacks as well, and there was no changes made at that during that discussion. And so I feel like varying from that requirement right there, and just 2 years after we approved that type of change would be contrary to the general spirit and intent of the regulations. Based off of that, staff is recommending denial of the variance because of the fact that the applicant just does not meet the 5 criteria necessary for a variance. Now, this board would have several options available to it. You've heard testimony here that they could reduce the size of the building. If that would help, that would maybe increase that setback to something between 10 and 30 feet. You can certainly do something like that. This board could also choose to table it. If you want to table this, you can table this for a month, take in all the testimony that you heard here and think about it for a month, and then come back in June and you can render a decision. You can either do that by closing the public hearing and then you would just have a discussion, or you could continue the public hearing until June, and at that